So the first way in which you can fund a limited liability company, the first one is called a contribution. Now, what does that mean? With the contribution, what you're doing is if we have a limited liability company that we've set up here and I'm the member of that LLC, the contribution, that is, you're the member, you're contributing the money to your LLC. You're moving the money in. So if I had $50,000 in my personal account right now, so contributions, note this, they come from the members. So if I had $50,000 in my personal account and I wanted to get it in the LLC, all I would do is write a check and move that money directly into this limited liability company. So then it would be sitting right there. And then on the books of the LLC, it would say that member A, that's me, contributed $50K to this company. Now, this type of strategy is a great strategy to use in the following scenarios. One, I would use it if you're setting up a Wyoming holding LLC to protect your cash. So for example, in my personal structure, I have a Wyoming LLC that I've set up that holds all of my cash, savings, CDs, treasuries, things like that. So when I set up that LLC and I funded it, I moved money in as a contribution from myself. Now, the reason why I did this is because I wanted to protect the investments inside of here from my personal creditors. So if somebody sued me and they got a judgment against me, I have the charging order protections of that LLC. So if you're setting up a holding company, something to protect your cash, maybe it's private lending, whatever that is, a contribution makes a lot of sense. Now, a second scenario in which you might want to consider this type of strategy is if you're starting a new business. So if I was starting a new business here, down here, and let's say it's a bakery, and I needed some funding to get my doors open and buy equipment, things like that. Well, in that case, I would probably make a initial contribution to this LLC. Now, here's where it can get a little interesting with contributing money to the LLC. Let's say your total startup to get this business off the ground is over $50,000. In that case, you may not want to make the entire amount of funding that you need. So let's say I needed 250. You might want to make you may not want to make a full 250 contribution. Maybe you make a partial contribution, and I'll tell you how you make the rest here in just a moment. Let me just keep finishing these contributions. So a new business might be one. If you're setting up an LLC for real estate with funding, meaning this, if you're going to be obtaining a DSCR loan, you're buying property directly in, let me get rid of these, directly in the name of a limited liability company here, and you're going to get a loan to do it. Well, in that case, I am borrowing, let's say, $180,000 from a lender, and I'm going to buy this house. So here what I would do is I would move in if I needed to for closing. Say I had $40,000 for closing. I would make that a contribution from me. I would put that money in, and that would be my contribution. So those are the three scenarios in which we typically see someone making a contribution. Now, what's the drawback? Okay, because the benefit is this. It's really simple. All you do is you move the money in as a member, which, by the way, I do want to hit on a certain point here, is that I've seen individuals tell me before or try to do this, that they want to fund this LLC. Maybe they have a business over here that has a bunch of cash inside of it. Maybe it has 200K, and they will just write a check from this entity over to this entity. Do not do that. That is a huge problem. It's a huge no-no. It's going to blow up your structure if you're ever involved in a lawsuit, okay? So when you're making a contribution, the contributions come from the owners. So if I had the money here, I would take out a distribution to myself, and then I would contribute it back into my company. So again, the point I'm making is that it's very simple. You can just write a check and make deposit in the LLC account. You can transfer it online. However you want to get the money into there. That is a contribution. Now, the drawback is that when you contribute money to a limited liability company, if this company is sued, all right, if there's a claim brought against the LLC and there's a lawsuit, the way it works when it comes to a lawsuit, if a judgment's entered against this limited liability company here for $500,000, here's what you got to be aware of. That when they sue the LLC and they get this judgment against it, the order of priority of paying out on claims, let's say they sold this house at a sheriff's sale, right? They sold the house because that's the only asset of the LLC. They sold it for $300,000. So you bought it for 220 and you sold it later on when there was a lawsuit for 300,000. So if they sold it for $300,000, the first person that's always going to be paid is a secured creditor, which is the lender. So the lender gets their $180,000. So that takes that right off the top. That leaves us now with $120,000. The 120 then would go to your next unsecured creditors. Well, the unsecured creditor happens to be the plaintiff that got the judgment against the LLC. So they'll take the entire $120,000 to pay off that $500K judgment. Well, what does that leave you with? It leaves you with zero. You see, the members of the LLC in the event of a lawsuit are the last people to be paid. The second way in which we can do this is via a loan. So a loan is where you or third parties, I showed you a lender, is actually loaning money to your limited liability company. So when am I going to structure it as a loan? Okay, typically I'm do this if I'm buying real estate for cash. Okay, so if I'm buying for cash, then I'm going to use this strategy. So this was a scenario I was presented with recently. I was working with one of our platinum clients. He called in, he wanted to set up a strategy session with me. And I got on the phone, he said, hey, Clint, I found this property that I want to buy over here in Texas, this mobile home park, RV/mobile home park. It's got all the stuff on it. How do I put that deal together? So I asked him, I said, well, are you going to be buying for cash or are you getting financing? I'm buying for cash. So let's assume that the price of this park here was $800,000. So in order to do this deal, okay, he thought he would just contribute $800,000. We would set up a limited liability company and he would follow this strategy right here. And I said, you could do that, but the problem is what I described earlier. If something goes wrong and the LLC is sued, you would lose potentially all $800,000. So I said, let's do a hybrid approach. Let's move, since you're the member, let's put in 10% of the overall amount. Let's put in $80K as a contribution. And then we will loan, okay, the $720,000. Now, how are we loaning that money? Well, could it come from you as the member? Could you loan money to that LLC? Absolutely, you could loan money to the LLC. But if you're going to loan that type of money to your own limited liability company, I would prefer that you do it from an outside LLC that is not associated with you. Meaning this, in his case, he has a Wyoming LLC that we set up for him. And that Wyoming LLC doesn't have his name on it. Let's just call this LLC here No One LLC. And he has money in there. Let's say he has $800K in there. So what I explained to him, what we need to do is we're going to set up this new Texas LLC, get a bank account. You personally contribute $80K. So he's going to take a distribution out of here of $80,000 and then he's going to contribute it up into the new LLC. And then what we're going to do is we're going to loan $720,000 from Wyoming LLC to New Texas LLC. Okay, so we're going to loan that money over. Now, when we loan it over, okay, to perfect the loan, we're going to prepare a promissory note. Let me just put PM there, a loan agreement and a promissory note. And then we're going to take back a deed of trust, okay, a deed of trust against this property. Okay, so that's going to secure it, meaning that this LLC here now becomes a secured party. So you remember the example I gave you when you contributed the money to the LLC and the property got sued and the lender was the first person to be paid? That's what we're doing right here. We're ensuring that you will always be the first person to be paid, that if something happened, you'll get back $720,000 right away because you are now your Wyoming LLC is a secured creditor of this property over here. If you're going to be moving hard assets into an LLC, the process is really simple then. So when you're moving hard assets in, that is considered to be a contribution. So for example, if I have a house, right, I have a rental property, it's in my name, and I want to put that property, into this LLC, by moving that in, that is considered to be a contribution by me of that property when I deed the property into the LLC. So by deeding it in, I am hence contributing that property. I'm not loaning the property to the LLC. It's a simple contribution. So all assets like that, hard assets, that you retitle in the name of the LLC, or maybe it's not a titleable asset, Maybe it's coins or collectibles of that sort that aren't titleable. The way you would move those and fund those into your limited liability company. So for collectibles, what we do when we create the LLC, and actually this one should be a Wyoming LLC for collectibles. It could be your cash LLC that I was talking about earlier for your collectibles. So in that case, what you need to do is you need to document the fact that you intended to transfer these assets into the name of the LLC. Now, what is a good strategy here when you're moving collectibles into the LLC is that you actually hold those collectibles in a safe deposit box in the name of the company. So if I had a Wyoming LLC right here, I'd go down and open up a safe deposit box, all right, in the name of that LLC, and that's where I would store my collectibles. And the reason why I'm doing that is because you can imagine somebody could make the argument you never intended to put those collectibles in because you kept them at your house and you meant to treat them personally. So if you don't have a safe deposit box, then the best position you have, and you should always do this, is you want a funding memorandum. You put together a funding memorandum which shows your intent to transfer these items to the name of that limited liability company. And if you ever sold the collectible, any of your collectibles, make sure the money runs to the LLC and doesn't run to you individually. So now you got that paper trail showing that, hey, whenever I sold something, I sold it out of the name of the LLC. Which conversely, if you ever buy something to add to your collectibles, you buy in the name of the LLC. Okay, because collectibles, as I stated, most of them are not titleable. So how do you show that it's owned by the LLC? It's through your actions. And so you want to make sure that you recognize it as such in that limited liability company on the balance sheet. When you prepare your books and records for the LLC, it should list it there. And so all those little things do matter in the event of a lawsuit establishing who owns it. So listen, when it comes to funding LLCs, it's really not that difficult. The challenge is always going to be this, which strategy do I choose? Contribution or loan? And if you're unsure and you're in that position right now and you're thinking, hey, I got this LLC and I got to get it funded, here's what I suggest you do. You can set up a free strategy session with someone here at Anderson. All you have to do is go into the show notes below, all right? Go in there, click on the more, and it expands them all. And I have a link. Click on that link and you can set up a free strategy session. We would love to have a conversation with you to talk about funding your LLC, to make sure you can set it up on the right path to protect your assets. Guys, if you liked the video, be sure to hit the like button. Take care.